If you want to go into a business, do something that you love, something that you enjoy, something that you're passionate about. Then the work just becomes play. The time doesn't matter. You're not clock watching. You're quite happy to be there, opening up and then locking up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And you're having fun while you're doing it. The other thing would be never become too attached. And that allows you to keep going forward and not looking back.
Hi, so now I'm with Charan Gill, who is a successful entrepreneur and restaurateur from Glasgow, who moved to the UK with his family when he was 8 years old, worked down the shipyards, and then set up his first business when he was 29. An incredible journey, and I know you personally and I know what you have achieved, but I was just saying, I don't know the full Charan Gill journey of an idea, so can you tell us, how did you go from being an 8-year-old living in Glasgow with your family to being the successful entrepreneur and restaurateur that you are today?
My entrepreneurial journey actually started probably back in the Punjab, back in a dusty village, when my grandfather had great plans for us because he had been in the army, he fought for the British, he wanted us to be away and abroad and doing things. And I remember when he was teaching me English and he was teaching me numbers, it was all 1 penny, 2 penny, and it was how many pennies in a pound and all that stuff. That's what was planted, that was a seed that was planted. I left the Punjab when I was 8 years old, left my grandfather behind, left my grandmother behind. When you're coming all these thousands of miles into a new country, you're not coming over here just to be normal or ordinary. You're always going to do something special. I always knew that one day I would have my own business. And the thing was, I wasn't impatient about it. I was very fortunate that I worked in Yarrow's shipyards for 8 years, and a lot of people would think that was a wasted 8 years, but not for me, because I think it was not just an apprenticeship into shipbuilding, it was an apprenticeship into the Glasgow psyche, Scottish people, how they work, how they think, the humour. And that was very important for me, because everything that we do is all about people. It's all about that connection that we have with each other. And through Yarrow's, that allowed me to develop that connection, and Scotland became my home. I was never in a rush to go into business. I knew one day I would, because I grew up in a circle of people where entrepreneurialism was encouraged. Nobody was going to keep anybody down. I grew up watching people who couldn't speak English, who couldn't read and write their own language because they'd never been to school. And they'd come over here, and if you listened to the stories of these people, it's very, very motivational. And you believe that if they did it, then for us, it should really be easy. And some of these guys went on to become millionaires. And when you sat in a room and you just listened to them, that electricity that was generated in that room, that energy, it just drives you to do what a lot of people would believe is impossible. I ended up working in a restaurant, the Ashoka in Argyll Street, which my friend owned at the time. I was in my early 20s. I was walking past and he just came out of the restaurant and he said, "Look, I need a barman tonight. Can you help me out?" I said, "Sure." But I'd never pulled a pint before. I used to work all day in the shipyards, and then in the evening, 3-4 nights a week, I would work in the restaurant, moonlighting as a waiter with a dicky bow, and I just loved the buzz of the restaurants, and I just couldn't get enough of it. As time went on, I got a full-time job in the restaurant, became a manager. My friend then bought another restaurant. I became a partner, eventually bought him out, and from there, the restaurant group, the chain, just grew and grew.
You make it sound very simple and easy. I got a job, then I bought them out. Tell us a wee bit more about how you actually did that. Where did you get the money? How did you know how to do it? What was involved in doing that?
I didn't know, is the truth. You just learn through hard work. My first partnership, I needed £6,000. I didn't have any money. I spoke to a bank manager. In those days, the bank managers had real connections with families. They knew who you were, they knew your parents, they knew your friends. I was a local bank manager and he said, "Look, if you can come up with £3,000, I will lend you £3,000. That's half the money, the way I saw it. So then I went out, spoke to friends and family, and somebody gave me 500, and somebody gave me 1,000, and somebody gave me a couple of hundred. So I eventually got my £3,000. So that was my first partnership with £6,000. And then, it was just work, it was just graft, it was just 7 days a week. Maybe I make it sound easy now, but it wasn't easy. But I'll tell you, it wasn't difficult either, because, when people ask you what kind of business you think I should go into, I always say that it's got to be a business that you enjoy. You've got to enjoy being there all the time. And then the work just becomes play. The time doesn't matter. You're not clock watching. You're quite happy to be there, opening up and then locking up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And you're having fun while you're doing it, because my social life really was in the restaurants. The customers were my friends. And this doesn't happen anymore. In those days, when you finished, the staff would sit down, we would all eat together, and we would all have a sing-song and we'd have a few drinks. And it wasn't this work, boss, waiter, staff, chef. It was just all in it together. And for me, it was everything wrapped into one. It was everything I would want. And of course, there has to be a need as well. And for me, the need was financial, because I had a young family, I had no money, and I'd always vowed that whatever it takes to put a roof over their head, and whatever it takes to give them a good education, if it was 24/7, if that's the way it had to be, then that's what I would do. The restaurant that I had, the Ashoka, became quite iconic. It was very, very busy, very popular. Those were the days when people would queue outside, for their tables, and even when they came in, everybody shared a table. It wasn't, okay, here's a table for 4, you put 2 people on it, it's full. No, 2 people are on the table, another 2 come in, you share the table.
And so what do you think made that particular restaurant so popular and unique and successful that allowed you to build this empire off the back of it?
We had great staff. I believe I was a good host. And people like to go somewhere where they're recognised. And, we had so many regulars that you can actually, set your watch by them coming in, because they were so regular in the way they came in. So the popularity really grew.
But you ended up having an Indian restaurant empire. There's quite a lot of people looking at it thinking, I'd be quite happy with the success of the restaurant. At what point did you think this isn't enough? And how did you then make that happen?
It wasn't the fact that it wasn't enough. It was more at that time to keep out the competition. People were looking in the area to move in and muscle in and get other sites. So there was a bar across the street which was not doing very well, and I knew the chap was selling. I didn't really have enough money to buy him out, but I went over one night for a drink, and I noticed there were some people in talking to him. They were Indian, and I knew they were restaurateurs. After they left, I went back across and I spoke to him, and I said, "So what's going on?" He said, "Yeah, they're going to make me an offer." I said, "What if I equal the offer?" He said, "That's fine." He said, "I'd rather sell it to you." So that was it. We shook hands, and I didn't really have money. So I went back to the manager again. I had the same bank manager for the first 16 years of my life. In those days, the managers didn't move around, the managers didn't change, and he was very, very helpful. His name was Alan Johnston. He cared about us, and he put his head on the block many times. That assistance from the bank was crucial in our growth, because if we didn't have that, there's no way we could have done what we did. So the bank actually ended up lending me 100% of the money that I needed to buy that pub that I then converted into Murphy's Pakora Bar.
I think you've been very modest. They were obviously also looking at the fact you had a very successful business, and you clearly had something that they could make a margin off of, and therefore growing your business was good for them as well.
Of course, that's what they're there for. It's a business at the end of the day for them too. But they did go the extra mile, and of course they're there to make money. And in those days, the interest rates, I didn't used to ask.
Yeah.
I didn't used to ask how much you charge me for this. I just wanted the loan.
You just needed the money.
I just want the money.
Yeah.
And I just want to know how much the monthly repayments are, and can I deal with those? And if I can, then it's fine. It's good enough.
So did you have a plan? So obviously you've got restaurant number 1 here, and you've now got the opportunity to do restaurant number 2 over there. Did you do the same, like carbon copy, or how do you decide what to do?
It was opportunities. Once you start growing, once you start being recognised as somebody who wants to maybe buy up other sites, then you start getting approached by people who maybe want to sell up, or perhaps an agent who's got something on the market, especially for you, just tailor-made for your needs. And so, you started getting approached. And then you just looked at the sites. And the good thing at that time was I wasn't just building up a restaurant business, I was also building up a property portfolio because all the restaurants that we bought the freeholds. My grandfather said to me that, see, if somebody is selling land that's connected to your land, it's worth a lot more to you than it's worth to anybody else. Always buy it. And I always did that, right? If a shop came up next door, I bought it. And I ended up in a Girl Street owning almost the whole block because as each shop came up, I bought it because I'll knock it through, I can do more with it than somebody else can. And it was just simply that advice that somehow stuck in the back of my head. And one of the things with expansion I always looked at was the business model. It was never going to be a city centre initially. It was always going to be the suburbs. It was always going to be lots of chimneys. We were very, very big in takeaways and home deliveries. In fact, the Ashoka West End, we were the very first restaurant, I believe, in Scotland to do home deliveries. Nobody was doing home deliveries. So we started actually doing home deliveries. And I remember when I launched it, right, I was in Mumbai and I bought a rickshaw and I brought it over and I tried to launch my home delivery service, trying to get some PR, but nobody was interested. But, the tabloids want something really corny, right, to get a story. So I opened up a phone book, because that's what we used to have. And I went down the phone book and under Shaw, right? So Shaw, Richard. So there was a few Richard Shaws, so I phoned up, I don't know if it was the second one, the third one. I said, is that Rick Shaw? He said, yes, I said, can you do me a favour? Can you come and pose, right, as a driver for my rickshaw, right? And the guy thought it was a wind-up, obviously, right? And then I explained to him, he said, right, I'm going to phone you back. Right, because I don't believe, I think this is...
That's brilliant, that's absolutely brilliant.
So he phoned me back and I said, yeah, look, it's, all I want to do is rickshaw, doing deliveries on the rickshaw.
Brilliant.
And of course we got, a couple of full-page spreads somewhere, right, with him. And of course he wasn't slow, right? He says, what's in it for me, right? He was an electrician. He said, you want work done and all that. I said, yeah, any future work, you can do the electrical work. So we launched a home delivery service. So I would always want restaurants where, like Bearsden, like Clarkston, Giffnock, Johnston, these areas at the peripheries. So because 50% of our business was always takeaways. We set up businesses, takeaway restaurants, and that's the way it had to be. And then, again, way ahead of our time, we set up a call centre. And I believe that if I hadn't sold up, then all these home deliveries that are done now, the
Deliveroos and
all that,
yeah.
we were way ahead. We set that up in motion. I had a guy, Billy Hall, who loved numbers and figures, and he was just great at, planning. So we had this one number that linked it to all the restaurants for home deliveries. And of course, we had 15 young student people, right, and taking orders. So you would go through, they would answer the phone and your last order would come up, and the phone would be recognised. And this was all new stuff, right? And then, of course, when they press send, then it printed off at the nearest restaurant. What we're actually doing was making them more efficient, because what was happening in the restaurant is, you can imagine, there's 2 phone lines. The staff's under pressure, looking after customers, and the phone's ringing. It's the last thing they want. I found sometimes in the restaurant, you'd be putting the phone off the hook, right? Because you can't deal with it. And because you're doing it all manually, you were making mistakes and taking addresses and all that stuff. Then we just sort of flipped the whole thing where somebody could actually talk to somebody on the phone and have time to chat to them and maybe even try and upsell something, make the whole experience much better. It was a natural progression. Perhaps it was easier because we did have sites all over. The postcodes that we couldn't cover, we approached other restaurant owners and we approached takeaways and said, look, we're getting all these phone calls and we can't deliver in your area. Would you like to be our agent in that area? And if you don't, we'll ask the guy across the street. You see? Of course they're going to come on board. It was a natural progression. It was actually at that stage that I decided to sell up. To me, business or making money is a means to an end. Really, the only thing that money is useful for is to give you the freedom to do what you want to do with life. I think once you get out, you start seeing other things that you can actually do for enjoyment. I had to sacrifice a lot with my family. So there was a lot of time to make up, and I'm very fortunate that all my children all live within Glasgow. So none of them, got married and disappeared or went to live abroad. They're all within 10 minutes. I think I've got to know them more when they've been grown up. And I hate to think, what it would be like if it just got married in their 20s and gone and done their own thing, because I would never actually have known them. I've been very lucky that way, and I think a part of that was, drawing the line.
So that's all the good stuff, all the success. What about the tough stuff? There must have been a few dark moments, tough challenges along the way of building this business.
Every entrepreneur will tell you they've come that close to losing it all, and I'm no different. One restaurant opened that didn't work. There's another restaurant opened that didn't do too well. And of course, there's a lot of financial losses. I invested in other things, like there was a house building company which didn't end up too well, right? You lost some money there. I went into frozen foods because for me, it was a natural progression again, that I was making curries for people to take home. So why not have a frozen food factory, right? And go through Asda and the supermarkets. And I did it. So I ended up with a big site down in White Inch in Glasgow. And that nearly finished us off because I had no idea what I was doing. The thing about business and being an entrepreneur is not that you don't get into a mess, right? It's how you come out of it. It's knowing how to get out of a situation, which is very, very important. And it's that instinct to know, it is about taking a punch and taking a hit and knowing when to lose a battle so you can win the war, right? Knowing when to withdraw, okay? And all that is very important because quite a few times I had to, take a doing.
How did you get out? As you just said that, it's like, of course, that's the natural progression of after you've built this thing then, and other people have built successful, kind of very, very successful Indian brands that are available in the shops and supermarkets. How did you get out of that?
The most important thing is not to become too attached to something, right? And that includes money and, properties and business and, companies that you set up. Because if you become attached and every defeat you take personally, it'll take a bit out of you. But if you stay detached from something, because money, it'll come and go, it just works itself around. You'll lose some, you'll make some. You're not going to make some every time, and you won't lose some every time either. But the foundation was quite solid, right? And it allowed us to experiment. And if you can manage your downside, right? If you say, okay, what's my worst situation here? This is my downside, this is my worst situation. If I can manage that, then everything else is fine.
It's an incredible story, an incredible success story with a happy ending and also, or a new beginning, because it's not the end. But we've been asking everybody, if you could look back at everything and offer your one nugget of wisdom, what do you think is the most important thing for an entrepreneur or someone with an idea that wants to basically start a business? Or what's your nugget of wisdom that you would share with our viewers?
If you want to go into a business, do something that you love, something that you enjoy, something that you're passionate about. And then the work just becomes play. The time doesn't matter. You're not clock watching. You're quite happy to be there, opening up and then locking up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And you're having fun while you're doing it. The other thing would be never become too attached. And that allows you to keep going forward and not looking back.
Thank you very much indeed for sharing the journey of your idea today. And as someone that enjoyed many a curry, as a student round the corner on your 2-for-1 Monday nights, thank you for making these awesome curries and good luck with what you do going forward.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Good.